All right, chap. Now we're back for real this time. Sorry about that. We had a slight hiccup. I knew a couple weeks ago that when I went to go post the video, it didn't actually catch the beginning of it because Streamlabs hadn't actually got the content rolling. So I wanted to make sure that I got it where it actually posts the message in chat when I start. So now that we got that taken care of, tonight we are presenting percents. Nothing too crazy, but a common thing that we use a lot, especially if you go to stores and you're trying to figure out a deal. So I figured we talk about basic percent problems. We're going to talk about percent to decimal, decimal to fraction, so we can see that all encompassed in one thing. And then we're just going to talk about how do you deal with percents when you're out at the store and you don't want to have to pull out your phone or whatever device you're using to calculate that for yourself. Hopefully your brain, but I understand that people use their phones and stuff to help them out. So let's start with the first easy thing to talk about, and that is going between percents to decimals to fractions. I think if we start there, that's a pretty good spot. Then we can go into problems, and then we can go into our what we do with it in life application of it. So had to grab a different board, but we have some things to think about, and that is we can talk about if we have a percent, we can convert it to a decimal, and we can convert it to a fraction. What is going on with my camera today? Camera, hello, thank you. Sorry about that. Don't know what's happening. It's since I fell asleep getting one of the babies asleep tonight before getting on, all my stuff's taking time to wake up. So sorry about that, chap. So we have a couple things to think about. We can go in between all three of these, which is really nice. And if we have a couple different percents, so let's talk about things like 11%. If we had a 5%. 125%, and I don't know, 27%. Also, I finally got some new markers, and I did not expect them to write this thin, but that is okay. So then, if you have those, we can convert those all to decimals. All you're going to do is move your decimal place back two decimal places. And the reason that happens is when you think about percent, it's from the Latin term percentium, or centium, and that means 100. So you're moving 100 places. So if you go back to what you were thinking about in elementary school, you'd have it where you'd move two decimal places because of 100. So what that looks like is I would literally start here, and I would say I'm going to go 1 and 2, which means my decimal for this is going to be 0.11. So my decimal here is if I go boom, put my decimal. I don't have anything here, so what fills that place is a 0. So I have 0.05. Then here I'll do 1.25 and then 0.27. All right, so I've been able to convert those all to decimals, and now I want to think about it as converting them to fractions. And converting them to fractions is actually really, really nice and easy. All you're going to do for these is put them over 100 because they're in the hundreds place. So you get 11 over 100. We can't reduce that, so it just stays as 11 over 100. You have 5 over 100, which you can reduce if you like. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 100 divided by 5 is hopefully 20. And then you have 125 over 100. And I'm not too concerned about having a mixed number. I'll just leave it as a fraction. So each of these has 25 that can go into it, so we get 5/4. And then last but not least, we get 27 over 100. So this gives us our movement between percent to decimal to fraction. And this is really useful if you're working through a problem. I see too many students, what they'll do is they'll take a percentage and they just plug it in. And I'm like, can you use a percent? And they're like, well, yeah, I just do 11%. No, you can't use a percent. You have to change it to a decimal. Have to. So you want to be able to change it to a decimal, but you also want to understand that fractions can be changed to decimals too, or decimals can be changed to fractions. More often than not, I don't see students wanting to go from decimal to fraction, but they want to go from fraction to decimal. And just as a little refresher, we can talk about how to go vice versa, like going a fraction to a decimal. So, um, just a little bit of a review, just in case you've forgotten. We'll leave. Let's talk about if you're talking about a fraction, right? We'll start with something simple, just to make sure that we're okay. So, if you have 1/4, and you're like, hey, I want 1/4 to now be a fraction or be a decimal. That's the same thing as saying 4 goes into 1. All right, and then you start with some long division. It's probably been a while. 4 can't go into 1, so you put a decimal place, which adds this 0. 4 goes into 10 twice, so you subtract 8, and that leaves you with 2. 4 can't go into 2, so we place our 0 again. 4 goes into 20 5 times. So 1/4 is the same thing as 0.25. I guess I should have wrote the fourth here and the 0.25 here. Sorry about that. But 1/4 as a fraction is the same thing as 0.25, which would then mean that the the decimal would, not the decimal, the percentage would be 25%. All right, so going the other way. We started from percent, went to fraction. Now we went from fraction to percent. So it gives you some ideas of kind of what's happening there. So pretty nice and simple. Nothing too crazy. But you can go in between all three of those without really too much of an issue. So now that we talked about that, let's talk about what percentage problems look like. I actually used to teach these a bunch several years ago. I don't really have to teach them too much anymore. But they'd give us something like, hey, 30 is 20% of what number? All right, and you have to think, what do these words mean? Okay, and this is different than when we talked about going through word problems and being able to read, analyze, translate, and solve. This isn't the same thing because you just have a question. What really typically bothers me is when a student sees this, or I'm tutoring, or whatever I'm doing, this type of problem comes up. They're like, "Oh, it's a word problem." It's just a problem. Like, yeah, there's some words, but it's not a full-fledged word problem that has like 2 or 3 sentences in it, and then the last sentence is a question. You're having to like peek out what pieces you need, all that kind of stuff. This is really straightforward and simple. All right. If you see the words as follows, you have 30 is 20% of what number? Is a word that you need to know, because is, right? Hold on. I had a moment of my brain just kind of dropping out. We need is and of. Sorry. That's what I wanted to say. So, of what number? So, we know 30 is equal to 20% of, means multiplication, some number. That's what we want to know. Sorry about that. My brain just like all of a sudden just stopped. So, we're just going to fill that in. So, whenever you see is, you should be thinking equals, and whenever you see of, you should be thinking multiplication. And I'm just going to use the variable n because we're talking about of what number, so it's easy just to say n for number, and you just plug in the rest. So no matter which way this goes, like let's say it says what number is 20% of, and it gives you some value here. Is always equals, of is always multiplication. Don't mess it up. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, as Luke likes to tell me, and he is 4. So we have to remember, well, 20% in a problem is actually going to be 0.20, and 30 just stays as 30. All right, we know that, and we have to say, okay, well, I have 30 equals 0.20 times n, and I want to solve for n. So this goes back to, how do I solve for n? And really, I'm going to give you all a second to think about that, because you should have something in your mind already what you need to do. If you are looking for n, you need to do the opposite operation. So since we are multiplying, that means we need to divide. So we're going to say, hey, I want to know what n is, then I need to divide 0.2 off this side and 0.20 off this side. And I have my new problem that says 30 divided by 0.20 equals n. And in this case, you might not know what the answer is, and that's okay. 30 divided by 0.20 is going to be a whopping 150. Now, time for my trick on how to figure out if you're right really quickly. So this means that 30 is 20% of what number? So 30 is 20% of 150. So if you went to the store, right? We're gonna block this part off over here. If you went to the store, and when you got to the store, so hold on. You go to the store. And want to buy a $150 television. That is 20% off. How much money did you save? All right, if you're buying a TV for $150, that is 20% off. So we're working backwards now. We know, based off our previous problem, 30 is 20% of what number? Now we have this situation. So another way to think about 20%, let me get one of these fine tip markers so that I can fit all this. So this section is like as if we said 20% of 150 is what number? All right, so we're just doing the inverse of what we previously solved for. But I'm breaking this down into a real world situation that if you went to the store, you saw something for $150, how could you find out how much you're going to save if it's 20% off? Easy peasy. All right. Hey, what's 150? So we're going to break this down. We know we want 20%, but if I take 150 and I divide it by 10, I get 15. All right. Which means 10% would save me $15. Okay, if I'm trying to save 20%, that's 10% times 2, right? So 20% would be $30. I keep forgetting to put my dollar signs. Would be $30. Bam. I already figured it out. I didn't have to bust out a calculator. That was really quick, simple, to the point. So if I was going to the store and I said, hey, that's $150 and it's 20% off. How much am I going to save? Well, if I divide it by 10, that'd be 15. And I'm going to get 20%, which is 2 tens. So 15 plus 15 is 30. Save $30. All right. Let's do a couple other examples so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But I think it's really easy to kind of think about things in this way. So if you're working through and you're going to the store, let's talk about the typical deals you see. Now, obviously, they could do any percentage off, but the percentages that we care about are the following. So we might see 5%, 10%, 20%, 25%, 50%. I know that things can be any value percentage off, but I think these are the typical ones you see. So I kind of want to talk about what it means to see each of these and break it down in a way that I think is really easy to understand. So we're going to choose something. I like to buy video games, and video games are generally $59.99. So we'll just say, like I do at the store, $60. All right. And we're going to talk about what it's like or how much it is to get 5% off, 10% off, 20% off, 25% off, and 50% off of $60. So if I go to the store and I say, oh, hey, that's 10% off, right? 10 is the one you want to start with because 10 is the easiest one to do. You just divide the number by 10. So if you see something $60 and it's 10% off, that means you're going to save $6, which means 60 minus 6 is 54. So your total that you would pay would be 54. Why is my camera bugging out today, guys? That's so weird. Okay. And as soon as you know 10%, you know the rest, okay? Because let's say it was 5%. Then if it's 5%, what's half of $6? Well, half of 6 is $3. All right. And this is useful because in the state of Tennessee, 10% is pretty close to what we pay for taxes on things. So it lets me know I'm going to pay an extra $6, which is why I like talking about 10%. 20%, again, so to get 5%, I did half of 6. To get 20%, I say, well, what's 6 plus 6? That's 12. For 25%, I say, hey, what's 12 plus 3? 15, because I know what 20% is and 5%. And for 50%, I say, hey, what's 6 times 5? That's 30. All right, and I've figured out how much I would save if the product was $60. That didn't take me very long to figure out. So if you're ever out at the store and you want to find out, hey, how much can I save? Bamboozle, there you go. Quick, easy math. All right. I wanted to do this because I think it's a good real life skill to kind of know about. And I find it helpful. Like, I find it nice to be able to like look at something and just know how much I'm going to save on it rather than going, oh, let me bust out my phone and calculate that real quick. You shouldn't have to. Like, you should be able to just be like, oh, divide it by 10 and then figure it out. All right. And it's a good thing to be able to teach your kids because then they can have fun doing it too. I just think it's kind of nifty, kind of a cool thing to do. I always talk about it to my high school students that go out and buy stuff because they just don't really pay attention to that. And I just think it's kind of a cool little trick you can do, save you some time, have fun with the kids doing it. That's it. That's all I got for today. It's a nice short Math Man Monday about percentages, something that everybody uses. I hope everybody's having a great day, especially going into the holidays. And I'll be back here in a little bit. I'm going to clean up my stuff and swap over to some games. But thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the content, hit the follow button. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. Leave me a comment. If you're interested in deco boards, hit me up. These are all lovely deco boards. They're magnetic backs, resin boards that are shatterproof. Hit me up. I can get you the contact information for those people. And I really appreciate y'all coming out today. See you here in a few minutes.